Fransız Senatosu'nun kararı mı? Amerikan Senatosu'nun kararı mı? Kim reçeteyi verecek? Kim bizim doktorumuz? Ermeniler Türklerin doktoru, Türkler de Ermenilerin doktoru.
In these words, there is the longing of people who share a common fate and live joy, grief, and pride together. In these words, there is the cry for humanity's wish to live in peace and for fraternity not to be beaten by hatred and resentment. This cry is the common voice of Armenians and Turks.
Ermeni iddialarının amacı siyasidir.
The objective of the Armenian allegations is political. This is clear. And they have more than one aim. One aim is to keep the Armenian nation that is spread all over the world together. The genocide allegations have become elementary, fundamental to the Armenian identity. The second aim is to make the faults of the Armenian nationalists be forgotten. Whatever happened to the Armenians were the result of the miscalculations of their nationalist leaders.
Yanlış hesaplarından gelmiştir.
The 20th century started with blood. World War I with the greatest death toll in the history of humanity. Millions of dead and injured. States obliterated from the pages of history.
Katliamlar Osmanlı İmparatorluğu'nun
The massacres started after the weakening of the Ottoman Empire.
ilk katledilenler Müslümanlar.
Those who were massacred first were Muslims.
Kendisini Hristiyan bilen
The West, who called themselves Christians, turned a blind eye on that, and the Ottoman Empire's falling backward was viewed solely as the salvation for the Christians. This attitude lasted a long time.
Uzun müddet sürdü.
This is the United States of America, University of Glendale in California, where the largest population of Armenians outside Armenia live. Here is Little Armenia, right at the center of Hollywood. 5,000 out of the 15,000 students of the university are Armenians. There are small to big monuments, plaques everywhere. Besides the city itself, the unfounded allegation of genocide has been monumentalized in the university as well. A different story on the Armenian question is told here.
During World War I, there was a genocide against the Armenian people committed by the Ottoman government, and that, of course, has a relevance for today. So it's not just history. Some people say it is only history.
An Armenian American, Albert Amato, opposes this statement of Marashlian. In 1992, Amato told before a notary public that the genocide allegations were a complete lie and that they were the result of a slander campaign. But what was the truth? What had happened in 1915 in the Ottoman Empire?
When they think of the word genocide, they think of what Hitler did to the Jews. They think of killing many people, of trying to kill all the people in one group. And I can categorically say this did not happen with the Turks and the Armenians. There are many reasons that we know that this was not that kind of genocide. One of the main reasons is that the Armenians survived. Most of the Armenians who were deported to Syria and Iraq, most of them lived. They could have been killed, they were not killed. The Turkish army and Turkish politicians fed these people.
Let us go back into history. An Armenian organization, Tashnak Sutyan. It was established in 1890 in Tbilisi. The main aim of the organization was to break up a part of the Ottoman territory and establish an Armenian state over this land. In pursuit of this political goal, Tashnak Sutyan resorted to armed action. Hundreds of documents and photographs among the organization's own publications stand as proof of this fact. It is evident that the organization used force for decades and put the Istanbul government in a very difficult situation when World War I broke out.
The Turkish armies were fighting in Caucasia. Starting from April the 17th, 1915 onwards, the Armenians' uprisings broke out first in Van, followed by various places in Anatolia.
Let us see how a scientist from Yerevan State University views the Tashnaksutyaan party that still exists today.
Bence Daşnaksutyaan Partisi gibi
I believe that a party like Tashnaksutyaan is completely necessary for Armenia. They play a very big and important part. I am in favor of their work. Yes, it is true that they block the Turkish-Armenian relationship, but I can settle for this.
Ben engeline ben razıyım.
The Armenian Tashnaksutyaan organization, which shed blood during rebellions against the Ottoman Empire, was followed by the organization Nemesis. In the 1970s and 1980s, Asala and Jag continued along the path of Nemesis. As a result of over 200 armed and bomb attacks by Armenian terrorists, 520 people were injured, 70 of whom were children. Over 40 Turkish diplomats and officials were killed. These sad attacks were conducted in civilized parts of the world, like European capitals, Australia, and the United States.
Man hat sie umgebracht.
They killed them, and by doing so, the matter was settled for them. They are killing innocent people, for instance. My friend in the Turkish embassy.
Türkischen Botschaft in Wien.
September 24th, 1981. Four Armenian terrorists who attacked the Turkish embassy in Paris took 56 Turkish citizens hostage, including the embassy officials. A security officer, Cemal Özen, was murdered. One of the murderers was Kevork Güzelian.
What has perhaps been most dismaying about those crimes and others is that within the Armenian community, the culprits have been heroized rather than lamented or deplored, and they become, to that extent, role models for youth to emulate, something similar to suicide murderers in the Middle East. And that is something that is ominous for continuing to have this, I think, very unhealthy estrangement between Turkish Americans, Armenian Americans, and Turkey and Armenia.
Heroized terrorists, legalized murders, bombings. The point that draws most attention is the identification of the relocation law as genocide. April 24th, 1915 is alleged as the beginning of a non-existent genocide. An untrue version of history has been passed to generations. Despite all adversities, some people who are not afraid to tell the truth still live.
A Turkish friend saved my father. He took him to the Russian army, traveling on foot for 3 nights and 3 days. Sometimes, when the subject opened, when we had guests, or the conversation got deeper, my father's eyes would fill with tears, and he would say, "The Turks were good." Turkish villagers always had good intentions towards Armenians. The Turkish villagers, even the whole Turkish nation, were so good to Armenians, and Armenians were close to them. But the Kurds, they took advantage of this. They did very bad things. They raided us. They would even steal the things we carried. They were plunderers.
An Armenian who saw the truth himself tells about the Turks and immigration years. But there is another truth, the murders committed by those who claim to have been subjected to genocide. Blood and tears remained from the assassinations conducted by Armenian terrorists against Turkish government officials and innocent Turkish citizens in many places of the world. Danish Tunalagil, Turkish ambassador in Vienna, was only one of those killed by Armenian terrorists.
Burada da Ermeni dostlarım var. Hepsi benim başlarını önüne yiyorlar benim karşıma.
I have Armenian friends as well here. They all lower their heads in front of me. It's because they're guilty. It's not something they want. They're sad and they're grieving. In fact, this Asalla is making a mistake. They're harming their own country, not especially us. They're sowing discord. They don't want us to get along, to be friends. This means they're not real Armenians. I believe so. I don't feel hatred against Armenians. That was another group. For me, Armenians are different. Asalla is different. Asalla is something else.
Asala ayrı bence. Asala başka bir şey.
A Turkish woman whose diplomat husband was killed by Asala says it would be wrong to identify Armenians with terrorists. She says Armenians and Turks are friends. On the other hand, an Armenian scientist
Benim kardeşimden bir kişi kardeşime
If somebody shot my brother and killed him, I wouldn't even go to court. I wouldn't tell anyone.
kimseye söylemem.
If I had a gun in my hand, I would immediately kill the murderer.
Hemen öldüreni öldüreceğim.
those who in the past dressed up their children in the uniforms of Armenian rebels, donned with arms and knives, make their children take oaths for vengeance at school today. They crowd monuments installed in the name of an unproven genocide.
The Armenian school, which is our hope, is the basis of our example. We educate and surround our new generation with the Armenian spirit there.
In Armenia and Armenian schools outside Turkey, young hearts are made to take vengeance oaths.
Some of my Armenian friends during our dialogues told me about how from age 2, as they're growing up and they're developing their individual identities, they're also told that their identities are dependent on how they are different from the Turks and how they are victimized by the Turks. So that their personal developmental identity and this identity's relationship with the other become almost a normal thing for them. Thus, when such a person becomes an adult, he or she almost psychologically is obliged to be preoccupied with this type of identity.
The whole world is talking about the clash of religions and civilizations along with terrorism, which have turned into a global threat today. Were religion or sects influential over incidents in the past as well?
I have no doubt that all the religious problems we are facing now are an imposition stemming from religious difference.
I believe missionaries played a great role. Relations deteriorated after the 1840s and 50s.
Armenians compare their allegations with the Jewish genocide. How does that fit into international law? How do Jews who lived the genocide evaluate the Armenian issue?
The Jewish experience in World War II particularly, where the full power of an industrial state like Germany was trained upon a single people for no other crime except that they were Jewish, and where of the 6 million people who died, over 1.5 million were children under 12 years old, we think is unique. There has been nothing like it in history.
Today, Armenians who try to identify their situation with Jews seem to forget the murders conducted by their ancestors against the Jews. Armenians who served as Nazi officers in Hitler's army played a major role in this blood-covered page of history. In Caucasia, there were Armenian troops in the service of Nazi Germany and Armenian journals supporting the Nazi regime.
Hitler's famous quote, "Who remembers the Armenians?" Well, I can tell you exactly who remembered the Armenians. It was Hitler. I'm about halfway through with the next book in my series I'm doing, and my working title is Hitler's Armenian Nazis. And there were over 100,000 of them volunteered starting in 1935 to fight for Aryan purity with the Nazis. They even had a radio broadcast from Berlin once a week, and there were over 500 of them. They had newspapers. So when you come up with a fake document, which nobody can really verify that it just showed up like, well, Hitler said this. Well, Hitler also remembered the Armenians, and when he proclaimed them in 1943 to be Aryan pure, just like the Germans would, and it was the Armenians who lobbied Hitler to declare them to be Aryan pure. And when you look at Armenia today, it is Aryan pure. It's over 95% pure Armenian. They've driven everybody else out, and by law, you can't even, if you're a minority, you can't hold a public office in Armenia, just like the Nazis did. So they, got to know their partners in crime well during those from 1935 to 1945 for 10 years, and they're practicing it today. So, yeah, Hitler remembered the Nazis. They were his partners, and I think that needs to be told.
The genocide allegations are used as the philosophical foundation for the establishment of a greater Armenia, much spoken of by Armenians. They wish to disrupt the territorial integrity of a country.
As both Armenians from Aleppo and as Armenians gathered from Mardin, Marash, Kozan, Malatya and Sivas, we all believe that Silesia is our homeland, and we claim those houses as our fair legacy.
We who live in the United States are going to have to give up all of our land to the Mexicans because they had Texas and several other states, and the rest of us in the other parts of the United States are going to have to go back to Europe because the Native Americans owned that before they did. So if you take the Armenian logic to its conclusion, none of us belong any place.
That some Armenians want to establish a greater Armenia on Turkish territory is against international law and national sovereignty rights.
The Kars Agreement is a legacy from the Soviet Union. Therefore, as a successor state, Armenia should have adopted the agreement. However, Armenia remains silent on the issue. She does not adopt the agreement.
In various parts of Anatolia, there are mass graves belonging to Turks. Scientists witness today the results of massacres conducted by Armenians in Hakmehmet village in Öder.
In particolare c'era un villaggio, il villaggio di Hakmehmet.
There was one village especially, Hakmehmet village. I went to that village. A mass grave was found, and there laid the Turks that were killed during the incidents. There were about 30 people, and these were young women. We could tell from their clothes.
Massacrati durante questa questione.
He had his 21 or 22-year-old son with him. The Armenians said, "Let's slay your son as a sacrifice to God for you." They said that. This son was my elder brother. They took him and laid him down. They cut his head off while his father was watching. Not one Muslim man was left. They were imprisoned and killed. Children were boiled in water. They said, "We are serving you lamb," and made women eat their husbands.
Even Russian commanders reacted to the massacres committed by the Armenians. A cable message dated January 29, 1915, which was preserved in the Russian National Communist Party Central Committee and which was discovered a short time ago in the classified archives, tells about the actions of Armenian rebels. The reports received by the first Caucasian army commander reveal that some Armenian rebels active in the region have gone to cities and settlements and established themselves at households there. They refuse to abide by the orders of the castle commander. The undisciplined and immoral doings of these teams have reached such an extent that they are subjecting the civilians to violence. Colonel Yakovlev.
Во всяком случае, взятие Вана.
Whatever the condition was, following the takeover of Van, local Turks were killed. There were robberies and rapes. The Russian army that came to the region later on encountered with a city that was taken over. Russian commanders witnessed incidents of rape, robbery, and murder there. Documents pertaining to these are available at the History of War Museum.
И об этом документы в военно-историческом архиве есть.
Buradan hepsini doldurdular gemilere.
They put everyone on ships and took them to the islands. To Akdamar, Charpanak, and Adair Island. They killed them all and threw the bodies into the water. They disposed of the bodies in the water.
Ölüsünü kaybettiler.
The Ottoman Empire Sultan Mehmet II, the conqueror, had granted tax exemption to churches. Numerous Armenians had served in the Ottoman bureaucracy. In the national statement for Armenians by the Ottoman Empire, their rights and freedoms were guaranteed. Archived documents reveal that the Armenian nation, along with the other ethnic and religious groups, was granted privileges, and they served at the highest ranks of the state hierarchy and lived freely in peace.
The Ottoman Empire would not have lasted for 600 years. You can't for 600 years suppress, subdue, or bully a lot of people of different ethnic groups. And in any case, if you ill-treat your subjects, then the tax is not collected from them.
Bütün bunlar gösteriyor ki
This all shows that the Ottoman Empire felt trust and good intentions toward the Armenians under Ottoman rule, even after the Christian communities in the Balkans sought independence one by one.
Güven hissetmektedirler.
The system of the Ottoman Empire was based on tolerance, and she had the best record of the period. Experts point out to this fact. The following words of Mahmud II are important in the sense that they indicate the basic philosophy of the Turkish state system. I can only differentiate the Muslims of my subjects at mosque, the Christians at church, and the Jewish at synagogue. Apart from that, they are all my sons and daughters. The administration would view the different religions of its citizens only at their sacred places. Besides that, they were all considered equal.
Bu dönemde, bu süreç içinde biz Ermenilerden de hiçbir
Within this period, not a word nor a whisper was heard from the Armenians regarding independence or autonomy. On the contrary, they were serving in very important positions of the state apparatus. Because of this, even after the Greeks won their independence, after the 1820s, we see Armenian officers as the only Christian elements in the Turkish army, and they are called the Faithful Nation.
Ve şimdi sorulması gereken soru şudur. Niçin
The question that must be asked now is why two nations that lived in peace for 800 years started to fight in such a way. The Armenian nationalists say, the Turks had always suppressed us. Why would a nation who had not suppressed Armenians for 800 years all of a sudden start to suppress them at the end of the 19th century? Of course, that is not true in any way. The incidents of the late 19th century are the consequences of the emergence of Armenian nationalism.
The Ottoman Empire's offer of refuge to the persecuted Jews in Spain. For Americans, the year 1492 is a year of discovery, of new beginnings. However, 1492 was a gloomy time in Europe. In that year came the expulsion of Spain's large Jewish community. In a time when in Western Europe religious tolerance was all too rare, the Ottoman Empire extended the hand of friendship to a persecuted minority of a faith and culture different from its own.
Anatolia is the cradle of freedom of faith. The oldest synagogue in Bursa is an indicator of the tolerance of Sultan Orhan Gazi toward the Jewish and other communities in the establishment period of the Ottoman Empire. The Jewish star decorations on the ironworks of the Great Mosque are a documentation of being far away from religious bigotry.
I always ask the same question to my students. Have you ever thought about the fact that Turkish is not spoken anymore in the Balkans, Northern Africa, or Caucasia, where the Ottoman Empire ruled for over 5 or 6 centuries? It is very important in my view that the Ottomans did not impose the Turkish language or Turkish rule. Greek, Serbian, Arabic and Slavic languages, as well as Italian, were freely spoken.
Various documents are available in the British public records on the uprisings of Armenians against the Ottoman Empire. These documents reveal how these separatist movements were used by the imperialist powers of the period. The record number 22083, dated February 23, 1915, is a report sent by their embassy to Foreign Minister Sazonov. The report recounts Russians arming Armenians against Turks in the eastern provinces of Turkey. The record number 25167, dated March 4, 1915, is a cable message from Bulgaria. Mr. Varadian from the Armenian Committee in Bulgaria seeks help from Britain to transfer 20,000 Armenian volunteers to Iskenderun. Varadian informs that 10,000 Armenians are also waiting in the US to fight against the Ottoman state. Another correspondence in the British Foreign Affairs Archives informs that Armenian volunteers are ready to participate in the uprising in Kilikia.
Of course, some states worked on the Turkish-Armenian relations, and Russia, the USA, France, Britain and China had some certain gains. They played games in this region in the past, they're playing them now, and they'll be playing them in the future.
The record number 68443, dated November 7, 1914, in the British Foreign Affairs Archives, reads that an Armenian Ottoman general, Bogos Pasha, is ready for independence war under the command of Russia. Another document, dated September 7, 1915, under record number 126836, is a report conveyed to the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. The report informs on the activities of an Armenian captain, Tarkom. The report is an account of how Armenians planned both the massacres to be committed against the Turks and the independence fight against the Ottomans in detail. Apart from Anatolia, thousands of ethnic Turks and Azerbaijanis were killed by means of torture in Nachivan, Ahiska, and Ahilkelek, Azerbaijan. The reason was the dream of a greater Armenia. An expansionist policy from Anatolia to Caucasia was pursued.
The Armenians published a book in 1907 in Yerevan, today's Armenian capital. In this book, 1,301 cities are mentioned to have existed in the region. Armenian authors of the book say that 959 out of 1,301 cities were inhabited by Azeris and 342 by Armenians. Now I ask, where are those 959 cities? They were not only physically destroyed, even their names were obliterated, deleted from maps. Neither the city itself nor the name exists.
Letters of British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey in the public records dated March 6, 1915, and record number 30439, reveal that Armenians were both under the command of Russians and in cooperation with the French. Their aim was the partition of the Ottoman Empire.
Ermeni isyanları başladığı zaman aynı koşullandı.
When the Armenian uprising started, the same conditions worked the same way. Only the Armenians killed were registered, and a larger number of Muslims who lost their lives were forgotten. Therefore, Armenian losses are told in exaggerated numbers, in most cases, in all historical accounts, and there is very little mention of Muslim losses.
Müslümanların kayıplarından söz ediyor.
Continuous uprisings and the support by Armenians of the Russian invasion in the east forced the Ottoman administration to take important decisions. It was decided to relocate the people living in the places which came under Russian invasion to safe regions. The administration regulated this through a provisional law. This law is known as the Relocation Law. It comprises 4 articles, and the first article stipulates to return force and destroy in case of opposition to state forces and disruption of established public order and armed assault or resistance. The second article stipulates that villages and towns whose spying activities and treason against armed forces have been proven can be transferred and relocated to other places. The third article was about the temporary nature of the law, and the fourth article specified the government office responsible for the execution of the law. The text does not implicitly or explicitly mention any ethnic group or community.
Harp içinde bilfiil düşman devlete yardım etmekte olur.
You cannot criticize the relocation in wartime of those who are the closest to the front from a community that is actively helping the enemy. Likewise, the same policy was implemented during World War I for the Germans in Britain. During World War II, the French descendant inhabitants of Alsace-Lorraine were relocated. Americans gathered the Japanese Americans in camps. The Ottomans did not gather people in camps. They only relocated them in the vicinity of Syria and Iraq to the south of the region where war was going on with the Russians.
Çarpışılan sahadan alıp güneyde Suriye ve Irak içindeki bölgelere naklettiler.
Following the relocation law of 1915, Armenian convoys from Erzurum, Bitlis, where a war was going on, and from Sivas, the region of rebellions, started to move. They first came together at temporary gathering points. The Ottoman state promulgated an edict ordering that the elderly, women and children were to be carried by ox carts, carriages, or on horse or other saddle beasts.
Եվ 16 թվին էլ Անդրանիկը որ ղարսը պահանջում էին արդեն հանձնել Անդրանիկին.
In 1916, Armenian General Antranik had disbanded its army and returned to Kars.
Հայրս այլևս անելիք չունեին ղարսում.
When nothing was left to do in Kars, my father and uncle immigrated.
Ուղի են անցել. Մերթ
They travelled on a way full of torment for days, sometimes on foot and sometimes on carriages.
եկել են Լենինական.
They arrived at Leninagan after a very long journey, but they couldn't stay.
Չեն կարողացել մնալ այդտեղ.
There was cholera epidemic. They went to Tbilisi, but they weren't allowed to go to Tbilisi lest they spread cholera.
Հիվանդ եք, տիֆը կբերեք, կտարածեք մեզ մոտ.
Food was distributed, shelter was provided, and field hospitals which were established by the soldiers served on the way. Measures were taken for security. The Ottoman state was allocating allowances for those moving despite the dire financial situation of the state. The state orders were that those who were subject to the relocation law would be provided with housing immediately at their destinations. In addition, if necessary, those people would also be provided with food from the ration of the Ottoman soldiers at war. They would be served hot meals and meat.
After the incidents, Armenian delegation President Bogos Nubar Pasha gave an account of the numbers of Armenians and places that they were sent to or immigrated to. According to the numbers he presented, 250,000 went to Russia, 80,000 to Iran. The remaining 390,000 went to Syria and the Aleppo region. The number of those transferred was reported as 600 to 700,000 to the French Foreign Ministry. The figure 600 to 700,000 they presented originates from this report. Today, it is alleged that 1.5 million were killed.
Ve öldürüldü denilen bugün rakam 1,5 milyon. Was soll das Ganze? Daraufhin
Now, what does all that mean? It means it was not a death order, it was an immigration order. And it was not outside the country, but to Syria and Iraq, then the territory of the Ottoman Empire. Yes, it is true that a lot of people died in that period. The Armenian Prime Minister, Bogos Nubar, mentioned a 300,000 death toll for the Turks. I have this document in my possession. It has been a long time since we learned that the Muslims had more losses thanks to the demographic studies of Professor Justin McCarthy.
Ein Vielfaches an Verlusten hatte.
Benim anam, babam Adanalıdırlar, dört yolludur.
My parents are from Adana, from Dörtyol in Adana. They immigrated to Damascus. From Damascus, we went to Beirut. We lived for 5 or 6 years in Beirut. We came to Yerevan in 1946.
The photograph showing the Armenian committee member Mardo, Tigris from Diyarbakir, and their friends posing in front of the Turkish villager they had killed. This actually is the picture of truth. The reasons for the enactment of the relocation law were this kind of Armenian terror and massacres. Those who alleged genocide were actually committing genocide themselves.
They drove the people out of their homes and forced them to immigrate with the excuse of relocation. But under what conditions they were sent to exile to the Syrian deserts. This resulted in 1.5 million martyrs for our nation.
Al di là dei numeri, perché degli armeni morirono.
It is a truth that Armenians who could not endure till Syria died. However, this was definitely not a planned action of the government to exterminate an ethnic group. That is, the idea that Armenians had been subject to genocide is an historical intrigue, a lie. You say that 1.5 million Armenians were killed, that they were massacred. There must be a place where at least 10 or 20 of these people lie. That is, if they were killed, they must be a grave. Please come and show us the place. We will dig there too.
Nurse Tatiana Karameli, a student of the Moscow Medicine School, who served at the Russian Red Cross during the period of 1917 to 18, recounted in her memoirs the atrocities of Armenians.
I arrived at Bayburt on August 8, 1917. What I saw was terrifying. Armenians under Russian administration were committing horrifying, wild atrocities against Turks in Bayburt and Izmir. The rebels named Arshak and Antranik slaughtered the children in the orphanage I worked at with their daggers. They raped young girls and women. They took away 150 children with them while they were withdrawing from Bayburt and killed most of them while they were still on the way. A woman had a child after years of trying. The enemy man grabbed the baby from her hands, held him from the head and threw him to the ceiling. Pieces of the baby's brain got stuck on the ceiling. People like you came from various places and looked at the baby's brain on the ceiling. They looked at the blood, they took notes, and they left.
O vakit Ermeni mezalimi zamanında 19 yaşında vardım.
I was 19 during the period of Armenian atrocities, 18 or 19. The Armenians had established an organization. An Armenian general named Antranik led them. They started atrocities in the villages, at Ilıca, Alaca, Ambur Mahanda, Tepeköy and Dutru. There was not one evil they did not do there. In Erzurum, they massacred 6,000 or 7,000 people. They imprisoned them in huts. They tied a quilt on a water buffalo, and then they poured gasoline on the quilt and put the animal on fire. They closed the water buffalo in a hut. The water buffalo went wild and killed the people around by striking them. They were subjected to innumerable tortures. It makes a man go out of his mind remembering.
Gaziantep was an important city in southeastern Turkey. Armenians and Turks lived there together in peace for long years until 1918. Then massacres started, with firstly the British invasion and then the French invasion. 7,000 Turks, including children, were killed. The city turned into ruins, and bullet marks can still be seen today. The inhabitants of Gaziantep still mourn their losses. This is the memorial of Shahin Bey, who was killed with his friends while fighting against Armenians.
In Saim Bailey and in many places, they slaughtered children like animals. They were inhumane enough to boil little babies in hot water and offer them as food to their parents. Savageness. Raping and killing girls and women. Crucifying the notables of the settlement, and by skinning a bit more of them every day, letting them die from hunger and thirst.
Adana, Kilik, bütün o bölge Fransızların eline geçiyor.
Adana in the Silesian region was entirely taken over by the French. Because the armed forces of the French were not large in number, they brought in northern African soldiers and Armenian legionnaires.
The leader of this gang was the murderer of thousands of Muslims, the Black Antranik. His men came to Silesia and protected him. The Frenchmen gave them guns to do military service. What did they do? They took the guns and attacked the Turkish villages out of vengeance. They were hanging and slaying people. They killed women and children with no exception.
Zavallı kadınlar, çocuk demeden öldürüyorlar.
On January 18, 2001, the French Parliament passed an Armenian genocide resolution. They clearly turned a blind eye to the documents in the French General Command archives pertaining to the invasion of eastern and southern Anatolia during the period of 1914 to 1921. France, which made Armenians fight for France in the past, seems to forget the Armenian terrorists who attacked the Orly airport on July 15, 1983, and the Turkish embassy in Paris on the 24th of April, 1981, harming dozens of people. Has France felt responsibility towards history while accepting the Armenian genocide resolution?
La France, mais alors, vous nous donnez un pouvoir assez exceptionnel.
France recognizes a genocide in terms of legislation. She is right to do that. France has done that. However, as you know very well, that there have been no convictions made.
Aujourd'hui, il n'y a aucune condamnation, et vous le savez.
While the French Prime Minister says there is no judgment made against Turkey, an Armenian from Turkey gives the best answer to him.
Is it the resolution of the French Senate? Is it the resolution of the American Senate? Who is to give the prescription? Who is our doctor? The Armenians are the doctors of the Turks are the doctors of the Armenians. Other than that, there is no doctor, there is no medicine.
I
believe no one would benefit from twisting history. For that reason, I was not in favor of the passage of such a resolution. It is not the law that writes history. A law cannot judge history. We cannot judge. This is not a judgment.
It is abnormal to judge a situation between two non-French communities in the French Parliament.
Armenians and the French seem to forget the black pages of history they have made in Anatolia. Tens of thousands of documents are available in the Turkish archives proving the opposite of what Armenians and the French claim.
If the Turkish government officially recognized what happened in 1915 and gave a chance to all scientists, if the archives that have been closed and cannot be approached for examination were examined fairly, everything would be clear. This way, both sides would get what they would like in a fair way. It is not true that Turks hinder or forbid visits to the archives. I went to Istanbul, visited the archives. It is true that I had some difficulties, but I have these kinds of difficulties in Italy as well.
Turkish archives have always been open to everyone. Here are researchers from Japan, Georgia, and Kuwait who are working freely without any prevention.
Once I have applied, I can look at the catalogue immediately. And then once I have permission, I can look at the archives 2 or 3 days later. I can do my research easily. There was no problem when we came. The Turkish archives are open, like ours.
Among those who used the Ottoman archives, there is the Armenian historian Mr. Aras Sarafian from Britain. German researcher Mr. Hilmar Kaiser was accompanying him. They have taken thousands of documents as microfilms and photocopies.
Among the diaspora Armenians, there are people who act as a torchbearer for Armenian allegations. For example, Mr. Ara Sarafian is a leading name in Britain. There is Mr. Hilmar Kaiser in Germany. These people explicitly gave the name of the research subject as the Armenian Genocide Studies. We have presented them the documents they wanted to see without any limitations. It is interesting, during his research that lasted for a few years, Mr. Sarafian took photocopies of 3,000 documents from us. Mr. Hilmar Kaiser took photocopies of 5,900 documents.
Facts reveal that Ottoman archives are open to everyone, from the Armenian Mr. Ara Sarafian to BBC Television, to German Mr. Hilmar Kaiser, to the historian Alexander Safarian. Anyone who wished has had access to the Turkish archives and taken copies of documents. On the other hand, it is impossible to have access to the documents related to Armenians in the archives of Armenia and other countries.
I could not enter the archives in Armenia. I wrote a letter, but they have not even replied. I have never been able to gain access. I would be very happy if it were possible.
Armenians based their genocide allegations on the cable messages that were ascribed to the Minister of the Interior of the period, Talat Pasha. Aram Andonian claims to have found a document in Aleppo, and by means of this fraudulent document, he alleges that Talat Pasha ordered the extermination of the Armenians. Turkish scientists have proved that the said cable message, which is being exhibited in the Genocide Museum in Yerevan, is a fraud.
Mustafa Abdul Halik Bey was assigned as the governor of Aleppo, but had not gone there. It appeared as if he had signed a document ordering massacres when he was not even there. He could not have been there because he was still in Istanbul on that date. However, there was another governor in Aleppo. There exist, in the Ottoman archives, authenticated letters signed by the other governor in the said period. Fraudulence of this kind is common.
Besides the documents, codes were also fraudulent.
They would never send something handwritten from the capital city Istanbul to Aleppo. They would send a code. For example, 125, 364 next to it, and then 441, etc. Aram Andonian and his friends knew that the Ottoman Empire used codes for correspondence during wartime. However, they did not know what the codes really were. They made up the codes. We have the code books of the time. 2-digit figures like 22, 41 that they made up were never used. So, the fraud starts with the codes.
The Prime Minister of the Ottoman Empire, Talat Pasha, was murdered in Berlin by an Armenian named Tehlerian on the grounds of the fraudulent cable messages ascribed to him. General Bronsart Schellendorf, one of the national heroes of Germany, is among the people who happen to know Talat Pasha closely. In his article published in the Deutsche Allgemeine Zeitung Daily on July 24, 1921, Schellendorf stressed that the accusations toward Talat Pasha were unfounded. The British, the French, Italians, or Russians who occupied the Ottoman Empire could not find any documents in the state archives in Istanbul ordering Armenian massacres. 144 people were held by the invaders with the accusation of perpetrating Armenian massacres, but the court of the occupiers could not even produce a proper indictment and had to release them. The Istanbul High Commissariat documents and reports to Lord Curzon, now available in the British public records, also reveal clearly that Turks had not resorted to any massacres against Armenians.
Moreover, the Ottoman capital was under the invasion of the British, and they searched the archives thoroughly for 3 years. There is an official letter of the British authorities to the US. They said, "We could not find any documents in our archives that we can use to blame them. That is, that would constitute a legal proof. If you have any such document in your archives, send them urgently. There was no such document in the American archives either.
Amerikan arşivlerinden de böyle bir belge çıkmamıştır.
There is a legend, namely the Mount Musa legend, that Armenians wish the world to believe. This legend became the subject of Franz Werfel's novel 40 Days at Mount Musa. Mount Musa is in Antakya. Armenians there revolted against Ottomans during World War I.
Und als der Aufstand da in der Nähe des Musa da provoziert wurde,
An uprising was instigated near Mount Musa, and the Armenians withdrew to this mountain. They were equipped in the best way, and they had the best guns. They were positioned there as the forward attack troops of the Allied powers, almost certainly with the desire of turning Silesia and southeastern Anatolia into an Armenian province.
also Südostanatolien wieder zu einem armenischen Staat zu machen, etc. etc.
The author of the novel 40 Days at Mount Musa, author and poet Franz Werfel, was a Jew. During the time he wrote the book, Europe was under the suppression of Nazis.
Hat in seinem Roman die Jungtürken,
He used the word Young Turk in his novel instead of Nazi. Whenever the Young Turks appear, these were certainly Enver and Talat, they were symbols. They substituted Himmler, Kaltenbrunner, and names like that. And he used Armenians as a crutch, substituting for Jews. He identified them with the fate of his own people he rightfully feared for. As a poet, he was outstanding from his point of view. On the other hand, it was a great injustice to the Turkish nation.
Auf der anderen Seite war es extrem unfair gegenüber dem türkischen Volk.
There is a painting of skulls among the fraudulent materials some Armenians use for their genocide propaganda. The original of this painting is exhibited at Trydyogov Castle Museum in Moscow. Artist Vasily Verosagin was inspired from the 1871 Russo-German War tragedy, and he named the picture The Evil of War.
1915 yılında sanki çekilmiş bir fotoğraf.
One of the fraudulent materials used as proof was an oil painting of the famous Russian artist Verosagin that was painted between 1871 and 72. This painting was presented as a photo taken in 1915.
Yapılmış bir yağlı boyayla ilgilidir.
Some Armenian propagandists did not hesitate even to present a painting of a famous artist as a photograph proving the so-called genocide, and thus deceive the uninformed public. They conducted a slander campaign against Kemal Atatürk, the founder of the Turkish Republic, as well. An article was published on August 1st, 1926, in the Los Angeles Examiner Daily. The author of the article was claiming to disclose some statements of Kemal Atatürk as if he were accepting the Armenian claims.
Güya gazeteci, sanatçı diye şey yapılan.
It is alleged that a Mr. Emil Hildebrand from Switzerland, who claimed to be a journalist and artist, had an interview with Kemal Atatürk. That is right after an assassination attempt in Izmir against Atatürk. Let us assume it is true. It is a Hearst Group journal, Los Angeles Examiner. The article is published in that newspaper, and Atatürk's signature is on the title as if he had written the article. On the other hand, it is said it is an interview. That is, it is not even clear if he is the author of the article or if it is an interview.
Yani şu bile belli değil. Yazıyı mı yazmış iddiaya göre, röportaj mıdır o bile anlaşılmıyor.
Armenians with common sense accept that these allegations, which are purposefully kept alive, are unreal. The editor of the Armenian Review Journal, Mr. James Tashian, has stated that this article ascribed to Ataturk was a fraud. His article, titled "Statement Ascribed to Kemal Ataturk is Unreal," was published in the Armenian Weekly Journal on March 20th, 1982. Here is a small part of the long letter of Tashian. Ataturk has not pronounced such words. Please, we should refrain from such acts.
There is no information, news, or any notes about the journalist who is claimed to have spoken to Ataturk. There is no text of an interview. Whilst I couldn't find any record of this person being in Turkey, I researched elsewhere. For instance, I applied to the Swiss embassy. I inquired if someone of this name had ever come on this date. They could not find any record of the visit, and they informed me that the visit did not occur.
Among the documents that some Armenian circles use as the basis for genocide allegations, there are the memoirs of Henry Morgenthau. He served as the U.S. ambassador in the Ottoman Empire during the period of 1913 to 1916. During his service, his information resources were Protestant missionaries that worked in Anatolia for the Board mission. Besides that, his chief assistants were Ottoman Armenians who were employed as local staff.
The Morgenthau story is not a report to the State Department. It's a book written afterwards. In fact, when the British sought to prosecute 140-some Ottoman Turkish detainees on Malta, they asked the State Department, "You have any cables, have any reports that would show a massacre?" State Department reported back, said, "No, we don't." So this is something that Morgenthau wrote. It's all hearsay. He didn't witness anything firsthand. And therefore it's subject to great doubt, especially because his chief assistants were Armenians at the time.
The personality and activities of Morgenthau were viewed debatable even in his own country. Instead of his memoirs, the official reports of the following U.S. High Commissioner Admiral Bristol were accepted as reliable.
With regard to Bristol, Admiral Bristol wrote reports, but they weren't necessarily overlapping in time with Morgenthau, but he stated that there were these invented massacres that were absolutely false, that were being paraded as truthful. So there obviously is, two views at two little different points in time, and Bristol, I think, was more on the ground than Morgenthau.
Another resource used as a basis for genocide allegations is the Blue Book. The Blue Book is a publication of the World War I British Propaganda Office. The British established a propaganda office during World War I. This office published numerous books, brochures, and communiques for propaganda purposes. The publication known as the Blue Book is one of these.
Mavi Kitap, Toynbee tarafından yazılmış değildir.
The Blue Book was not written by Lord Bryce. Toynbee edited it. The book is a compilation of news from various sources. No newspaper had any representatives in the region during the war. These are all made-up news items. They did not refrain from publishing them as if they were real incidents. This is what the Blue Book is.
The Blue Book is being used in many circles as a document due to the respectable name of Toynbee. On the other hand, they turn a blind eye to thousands of documents and publications that prove the groundlessness of these allegations. Today, many documents and information in various libraries is under threat.
It seems rather strange that anything that you find and you find reference to that's unfavorable to Armenia all at once mysteriously disappears out of an archives or disappears out of a library.
In Armenian schools, they still sow seeds of hatred, and they continue to politicize hatred. They put hatred against Turks in the hearts of the young.
The most pernicious element is this effort to exclude from public school curriculums any teaching of the facts and arguments that would call the Armenian genocide claim into question. They're really purposely trying to suppress access in the public school forum.
American historian Professor Heath Lowry proved that the statement, "Who remembers the Armenian genocide today?" attributed to Hitler is unreal. Professor Justin McCarthy showed with documents that Armenians were not exposed to genocide, but in fact that Armenians committed genocide against Turks. 69 American and Canadian scientists published a letter in 1985 in dailies like the Washington Post and the New York Times, stating that the incidents of 1915 were not a genocide. These scientists were threatened by some Armenians repeatedly. An American judge, Samuel Weems, was the last on this list.
They bombed the professor's house in Los Angeles, right in the middle of a country called the Country of Freedom. But it was not the end. Attacks to Professor McCarthy started.
Professor Shaw, whose only crime was to reveal historical facts, could not accept our interview proposal because his house was bombed and Armenian threats never stopped.
I'm aware of the accounts of things that have happened to Professor Shaw, and certainly any attempt to intimidate scholars in pursuit of any particular historical matter is abominable and shouldn't be tolerated.
Even as late as the 21st century, fanatic Armenian nationalists still continue their efforts to silence the peace advances by means of blood and violence. Parliaments of Western states who serve for different goals try to keep the Turkish state under pressure with genocide allegations. Despite everything, Armenians and Turks keep their wish to live together and build the future together, and express this wish on every opportunity.
Oggi si chiede conto, dopo 80 anni.
After 80 years, an account of the so-called Armenian genocide is requested. Now, as an Italian, as an heir of the Roman Empire, right or wrong, should I be responsible for what African Sione did in Carthage? 80 years, 800 years, or 1800 years, they are all the same to me. I address the diaspora. I address them for the following. Do not get stuck in 1915. There is a reality of Armenia now. If you think of your offspring, your people, look for ways and make efforts to make it possible for the two nations to live together like we do here.
In this critical threshold, everyone can benefit deeply from friendship and truth free of slander and lies. From the very start of Sari Gelin, this is what we wanted to remind people of.